I think I've graded everybody's question 18. I'll start on 19 tonight. I was still finishing 18 for one of the larger classes. So hopefully I'll get 19 tonight and tomorrow, and maybe 20 as well. I've got to get it done this weekend though, because some stuff's happening next week that's going to keep me from grading. So I'll try to get there. Wanted to show you a few things. Let's see if I can find them. It's always kind of a risk. Let's see. Goodness. Don't ask me questions about your quiz just yet. I'll answer them in a minute though. Yeah, somebody was asking about why something happened with their quiz or something. I don't know. I'm trying to find the survey response. So, and then we'll let the other late people in here in a second. Okay. I don't know why it doesn't show up when I try to open it. Let me try again. Okay. All right. Oh, and let me see if I can let more people in. I don't know where they went. Where did the other people go? Let me look. No, it's not right. We'll let them in a minute. It's their own fault because they're late, right? Okay. So thus far, 47 responses on the survey. We could show you who, but that would violate FERPA, so we're not going to. Do you want more questions or fewer? Most of you want more. It's about a 60-40, 60. It's 63 or 64-36 split. Essentially, are the questions too hard, too easy, about right? Most of you seem to think they're about right. That's closer to 70-30, which surprises me a little because usually people want everything to be super easy. I kind of thought the first quiz was too easy. This one was only slightly harder, apparently, which is good. And I think it's sort of funny. Oh, now I can let the other people in, it looks like. Let me write them down really quick. All right, you guys give them the lecture for me about how they should sign in sooner, so I'll keep going with this. And so were the questions, why is that there? Okay. Too hard, too easy, about right. Most of you seem to, nobody said too easy, okay, some too hard. And then was the review too vague, helpful, or unnecessary? My favorite is, I gotta find out who the student is who said unnecessary and just go ahead and give them an A, so I like that. So this is the most divided response, but it's pretty close. It's still, more than a 60-40, which is gonna be better than anyone does in the presidential election, so I'm not feeling too bad. So, I know one of you has asked me some questions about a quiz question and why did let me look at it. And I don't know if it shows in everybody's screen. No, okay. Yeah, if you emailed me privately about your quiz, I'll go back and look. Now, the reason, and I feel like I've said this before, but I'll say it again. If you take the quiz twice, it's going to take your first score, because the intention really is that you just take it one time. Because if you take it a second time, you've already seen all the quiz questions. So, it's not supposed to be one of those things where you keep taking it until you're done taking it and you have the score you like, because it's college and, not everything's supposed to be, you know it all ahead of time so you can prepare exactly for everything. Because, normally the way that I would conduct my classes, I would lecture, and then 4 times a semester, I would give you a test, and it would be multiple choice and then essay, and you would have 40 multiple choice questions, and you would have 1 essay question that you would know ahead of time, but the 40 multiple choice you wouldn't. And I wouldn't even give you as much help on that as I give you on the current stuff. So I'm trying to find something that's kind of reasonable and fair for a college class, which means not everybody's supposed to get an A. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's just kind of true in a college class. There's supposed to be kind of a decent range of grades. And one thing that I have noticed is in this setup, because I am telling you so much of the stuff ahead of time, fewer people are not passing. And I don't think my boss minds about that. I'm pretty sure you don't either. So, and typically when I would do the test, most people would flunk the first test. That was very, very standard, especially for high school kids. And then gradually your test averages would get a little higher in the 70s. So that the average person in an ACC class, for me, with dual credit, usually would get high C, maybe low B. Pretty rare for kids to get A's, and not as rare to get B's, but lots of C's. And most people were fairly content with that because the tests are, you know, it's college, so the tests are kind of harder. They've sort of been okay, you know, because, you know, pandemic and things are a little different. The system that we have now, which tends to produce slightly higher grades, seems to be okay with my boss. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, a nice in between where it's reasonable for you, maybe, I don't want to say this out loud, but maybe a little easier than it would be in a normal situation, because this is not even close to a normal situation. But still challenging enough that it fairly warrants college credit, because if we just give it, you know, if we just pass everybody, then UT and A&M and Texas Tech, Ethan's favorite school, don't take our credit. So sort of a tricky balance for me. So, but whoever, I know who you are, because you said, I promise you, I'll go back and look at emails. I just, yeah, I'm behind on grading stuff. So, if you sent an email, I probably got it. I just need to go back and look. If you feel like I didn't get it, feel free to resend it. It's not going to offend me. Now, I say that, but someone sent me an email today that offended me, but it wasn't any of you, and it was really rude. So, so don't do the really rude email. And it wasn't any of you. All right. Other stuff we probably want to talk about. Let's see if I can find it. Weekly question. Let's see. Screen share. Weekly question. You know how you have to read stuff out loud to do it. World War II is often referred to as the Good War. Evaluate the title for the war. Is it appropriate? Why or why not? So by the end of class today, we should talk about that a little bit. And let me check the chat to see if I missed anything else, and then we will get started. Okay. And oh yeah, some other people ask me on the quiz, like, can you explain to me what question number 3 was? And I think I know the quiz program shuffles your quiz questions. So I'm not really sure that my number 3 is your number 3, but I think I might be able to go in, like, look at your view and see what showed up as question number 3. But I'll try to get to that in the near future. Other stuff. Study thing for future quizzes. I'll try to get that up sometime tomorrow. There's no way I'm going to do it tonight. I've got to tonight, and I'd rather grade. I don't want to grade, but I need to grade. So look for that tomorrow. Also, by the time class is over, I will have mentioned a possible extra credit assignment, really small. And that should be up by tomorrow as well. You'll have at least 2 weeks, probably 3, to do that, because I don't want it due when your questions are due. I'll want it due a week before, because I don't want all this stuff at once. And this will be easy to grade because it's going to be not worth very many points. So, but, and it's extra credit, so you don't have to do it. Up to you. Up to you. All right. And I'll tell you about it in a little bit. Okay. Lecture notes, let's go to those, get started with our stuff for the day. All right, I feel like I left off with the charts last time, so right around here. And just a gentle reminder that the United States enters the conflict as a result of Pearl Harbor, the assault in Hawaii, in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor. December 7th. Okay, thanks. Yeah, because that makes sense. Just have a little preposition moment there. It's a preposition, right? Yeah. December 7th, 1941, which should be the date that will live in infamy, so you have to remember it. which probably means there'll be a multiple choice question about it because I just feel obligated. I don't want to turn FDR into a liar. Also, I'm going to point this out. When I was doing the weekly grading, notice that not you, I don't remember who it was. I don't think it was your class actually, but people sometimes think that FDR and Teddy Roosevelt are the same person, and I'm just going to mention to you that they are not, okay? So you don't want to use them interchangeably because they're not the same person. Teddy Roosevelt, clearly older because, you know, he's dead before World War II, and he was Franklin Roosevelt's uncle, I think. He was Franklin's uncle and Eleanor's cousin, maybe the opposite. I can't remember, but he's related to both of them. And all of them, their last names were Roosevelt. Mrs. Roosevelt was Miss Roosevelt. Her last name was Roosevelt before she married Mr. Roosevelt, which, yes, that means they were related. It does. However, you know, it wasn't a genetic issue. So I'm saying it was, I'm not saying that, you know, I probably wouldn't marry a fourth or fifth cousin, but, you know, it wasn't a, you know what I'm saying. All right. Their kids were okay, is what I'm saying. All right. Stuff we need to talk about. As far as battles, general overview, Battle of the Atlantic is really for control of the Atlantic Ocean to make sure that the shipping lanes were clear and safe. This will be eventually won by the Allies once sonar is developed and the Allies develop the ability to build ships faster than the Axis powers can sink them. And also they're going to send ships together in convoys and make sure that there are military ships there to protect them. Battle of Stalingrad is the farthest ascent east by the German military, and this is where the Soviets start to push back. And this clearly is after the Nazi-Soviet pact is broken. So the Germans do eventually invade the Soviet Union, even though they agreed not to. Battle of Stalingrad, do you see how many people died in the Battle of Stalingrad? That is one battle, one battle. Now this is going to be why when the war is over, the Soviet Union is not very happy with the United States, because we are going to provide a lot of assistance to the allies that are in Western Europe, but very little assistance to the Soviet Union. It's going to be a great source of frustration to them. And we're going to suggest there are two reasons we don't help them. One, geography. That's fairly legitimate because it's going to be awfully hard to get stuff to the Soviet Union, because it just is. Thing number two, we don't like them. I mean, that's not going to be our strongest argument, but we really don't like them. So even though they're our allies, they're a bunch of evil, godless communists, which is going to start to bother us the closer we get to the end of the war. Operation Torch is the Allies' ability, or the Allied attempt and successful attempt, to stop the push of the German Navy into, I lost track. No, not the German Navy, excuse me, the German military in Northern Africa. So Operation Torch is the defeat of Erwin Rommel's Africa Corps by the Allied powers, led at this point by somebody named George S. Patton. Now, if you know very much about military stuff, Patton's a fairly famous guy. He is going to study Erwin Rommel pretty intently. He's going to read the books that he wrote, and he will lead the tank command in Northern Africa. He's also going to get in trouble several times during the war, at one instance being punished so that he's not able to participate in D-Day, but his participation in the Battle of the Bulge is going to be crucial as well. He thinks he's a reincarnation of several important past generals: Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Napoleon. He'll have relatives who fought in every major US conflict. So he's really entrenched in military lore and tradition, and he's unusual. Well, that's the understatement of the day. So there are lots of things written about him. If you ever want to read about a military commander that had a pretty strong effect in World War II, he would be a good one for you to read about. That's George Patton, Patton. All right. I lost track. Oh, Anzio. This is about the Allied powers getting a stronghold in Sicily and then eventually Italy. So this is Northern Africa up through Sicily into Italy. D-Day is the one that I'm going to ask you about on the quiz for sure. This is the retaking of France by the Allies, and they make movies about this all the time. I think, oh, what is that Tom Hanks movie? The military movie that everybody has seen. Saving Private Ryan. That one I'm the only person who hasn't seen it. I have read that their depiction of D-Day in that movie is really, really accurate. D-Day is a multi-pronged amphibious assault across the English Channel into France that's planned by Dwight Eisenhower and really is the beginning of the retaking of Western France. And notice this happens pretty late in the game, June 6th of 1944, and then the war in Europe is over in less than a year after that. Battle of the Bulge is kind of Hitler's last stand, last attempt at an offensive to break through the Allied lines in Belgium. And this is where Patton comes in to kind of shore things up and save the day. And VE Day is Victory in Europe Day, and that's when Germany surrenders. This is about a week after, I could be wrong, but I think it's about a week after Hitler's assassination. So Germans surrender. And because, you know, we're allies, we are going to we have talks, a lot of talks, of course, with England, the leaders of England, France, and the Soviet Union, and they will allow the Soviet troops to lead the, I don't know, parade is the right word, but lead the troops into the retaking of, somebody's asking a question, Berlin. I don't know why I could not think of the name of the city. Hitler does assassinate himself. You know, that's a little actually, you know, more reflexive because, yeah, he commits suicide. There's lots of dispute about this, and it kind of depends on what sources you like and if you like conspiracy theories, because there's always those folks that think, well, Hitler survived World War II and then ended up in Argentina, and, you know, it's possible. I don't think so. Maybe, nah, I don't think so. But even if he did, we never saw him again, and he'd be dead now. So, but I don't think he escaped. The reason that I think this is one, it's kind of standard historical, it's accepted by by World War II historians that he did commit suicide. There are Russian troops who say that they witnessed, you know, that they went into Hitler's bunker. They were the ones who first went into Hitler's bunker, and there was enough of his body left to be recognized. You know, the plan was that he would assassinate, or he would shoot his wife, who had been his girlfriend pretty much for her whole adult life. And then the day that they were going to die, or the day he was going to kill them, was the day they got married. So he assassinated his wife and then his dogs. Don't get mad at me, because I know some of you are like, why do you have to assassinate the dogs? Really? After the Holocaust, you're surprised he would kill dogs? So he's horrible. That's why he did it. It's Hitler. He's horrible. And then he kills himself, and then he orders his troops to set his bunker on fire. And the thought was that it would burn his body so it wouldn't be found, and then there would be this mythology that came up around him that his body was never found, so he may have escaped, that sort of thing. So, but most mainstream historians are, you know, are okay with the Russian record. And as far as, you know, are there pictures and stuff like that? There are not. Now, that wasn't necessarily seen as what you did back in those days, but in the modern era, like I am pretty sure, I feel confident of this, that after the raid, the Osama bin Laden raid, that there were photos taken. Now, those are not going to be published. You know, they're going to be held in, excuse me, oh, sorry, the CIA will keep them private, or they'll keep them secret. For the typical time is 25 years, but they let enough people see them in the secret parts of the government that people will believe that that is true. And then you have that 25-year period in the modern era where we kind of keep stuff quiet. They do that with most presidential records. There's some other documents that they never unseal at all. So some of you are going like, yeah, Area 51. I really. All right, back to battles. Oh, we were done on this one. So we go to the Pacific side. And so this is, of course, is the Japan side. Almost all of these are battles where the Allies win. The battle in the Philippines is, commences with the Bataan Death March, and that is definitely not a battle that the Allies win. There are numerous books written about Bataan. You could read one of those for your book review if you so desired. So Japan will take control of the Philippine Islands. This is after the U.S. has removed the major officers, including General Joseph MacArthur. Excuse me for the little delay there in saying MacArthur. And we leave behind enlisted men and contractors and Filipinos who get captured and then taken on the Bataan Death March, which is through the length of the Philippines, through the northern part, so that they can be shipped over to Manchuria to help build railroads. By the time the war is over, fewer than 25% of those folks survive. So this is pretty brutal stuff. And the people who do survive apparently write books about it. Battle of the Coral Sea stops the advance of the Japanese Navy toward Australia and New Zealand. Battle of Midway is the first modern defeat of the modern Japanese Navy. And it's pretty costly. You see the US loses 3 aircraft carriers. Japan loses 4. But it really kind of ruins the myth of the invincibility of the Japanese Navy. So it's an important battle, which also means a lot of stuff is written about it. Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa are some of those island battles that are sometimes part of the campaign referred to as island hopping, where the Allied military plan is not to take every single island, but the ones that seem to be of the most strategic importance. All of these are going to be that battle to the last man kind of thing, and there'll be very few prisoners of war taken. All of these are won by the Allied forces with very heavy casualty numbers for both sides, but especially for the Japanese. Iwo Jima is where they have the famous flag raising, and Okinawa is, you know, a highly occupied Japanese controlled island where there'll be, you see the number of deaths, 110,000 Japanese soldiers. In these 3 island battles, I think there are a handful of prisoners of war because the expectation is that you fight to the death. So that's what the Japanese soldiers do. To the point where in Iwo Jima, they hide in various levels of caverns or caves that are available on the island. And in the other islands as well, they tie themselves to trees so that if they get shot, they don't fall out. They tie their weapons to their hands so that they don't drop their weapon. And because of what happens to you reflexively after you die, you might even continue shooting at people after your death. So They really take the fight to the very end thing quite literally. And then the last thing that's kind of listed on the battle chart is dropping of atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, or Hiroshima, if you like it said that way better. And will threaten to drop a third bomb if there isn't a surrender. We don't have a third bomb, and there is a surrender. They clearly didn't know we didn't have a third bomb. There's lots of stuff written about these two events as well, the atomic bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And you could read some about this if you like. Try to relate it to the United States if possible. Of course, the modern era, there's lots of discussion about whether dropping these bombs was ethical, moral, that sort of thing. During this era, the thought was whoever got the bombs first would use them. That's, that was the expectation. So it was a race to develop the weapons. And I think during that era, the American public, and honestly, everyone, just assumed that whoever got them first would use them. And that was the expectation. So, it wasn't a should we do this, should we not do this sort of thing. Because, different times. So they saw the world a different way. All right. And there wasn't a whole lot of hand wringing, if we do this, what's going to be the after effect for the people of Japan, in a way that we probably would do more in the modern era. I'm not saying there wasn't some concern about that. I'm certain that there was, but not enough concern to keep people from dropping, from people in power, positions of power, from saying like, hey, we shouldn't drop these bombs. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see if you guys have any questions. Is there anything you want to ask to this point about any of those battles? It's a pretty quick overview for sure. I feel confident that you'll see Pearl Harbor and D-Day on the quiz. Feel confident of it. All right, I'm going to assume there are no questions unless you type something in here in the next minute or so. So let me go back to trying to share the screen. Some of my comments about what you've written so far. All right. So what's going on back in the United States while stuff's going on in the rest of the world? One, we're producing a lot of stuff, okay? So since we're producing a lot of stuff, everyone's working. So everybody's got a job or two at this point. It's the end of the Great Depression. It's the end of unemployment as we know it. 50 million men will register for the draft. We'll draft 10 million. Several others will volunteer. We'll have a government agency, the War Production Board, that coordinates industry in the war effort. We're going to ration consumer goods. So you have to have a ration coupon or sticker to buy certain things. These things are anything and everything from produce, food, fabric like wool, cotton fabrics, to tires, fuel, alcohol. Yeah, because alcohol's back, but we're sending some of that overseas. Chocolate, which would have been crucial for me. And then stockings, nylons, pantyhose is essentially what those are, because they use those for weapons, nets, and uniforms. So the weird time, we don't have as many consumer goods, so people are not buying as many things. So it means that people are saving money, which is not a very American thing. It's not what we do. But the only reason we do it during this time period is there's nothing to buy. My guess is if there'd been things to buy, we would have bought them, because that's what we do. They mentioned that the nation's budget more than doubles, but the number of people paying income tax increases by 10 times. So 4 million in 1940 to 40 million in 1945. Remembering, of course, that you only paid income tax if your income were at a certain level. So before this, people made so little money that very few people were actually paying income tax. So they were all like teenagers. Yeah, because you guys don't pay income tax. Well, you do, but you get the tax back. So it would be a similar situation, but it would mean that most people in the United States were as broke as teenagers. That might not be good, right? More people will move to the West Coast looking for defense industry jobs. And since lots of people had already relocated there because of the Dust Bowl, those jobs will fill fairly quickly as well. The South will also become a site for weapons development, especially in places like Florida, Texas, and Arizona, because in those places there's more sunlight, throughout the or more sunny days. There's not necessarily more sunlight, but it's sunnier for more days. Okay. Workers said that they wouldn't go on strike, and very few workers did threaten to go on strike. We'll talk about one group that did, because they wanted to be, patriotic. And the businesses made a lot of money, but they also froze wages because they were maybe taking advantage of the patriotic spirit of their workers rather than sharing the profit. And they might also have been trying to recover from the Great Depression. My guess is, I know this for a fact, they more than recovered from the Great Depression. Free enterprise is seen as many to be the fifth freedom. Remember that FDR had talked about 4 freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from want, W-A-N-T, and freedom from fear. Free enterprise is considered to be the 5th freedom, at least in the United States and in lots of Western Europe, as their economies recover and their countries recover from World War II. We create an Office of War Information that really controls the war message. At first, sometimes people think it's a little more pro-government than it is pro-war, in ways that it's pro-New Deal agency, but as time goes along and we privatize this a little bit more, we combine with movie companies, production companies, you're going to get pro-war commercials, you're going to get movie stars who advertise that we need to sell war bonds, we're going to be reminded to grow victory gardens, and we'll have famous people doing all of these things. And there are lots of books written about that sort of stuff too, World War II propaganda or the use of celebrity in World War II to promote the war effort. And that might be moderately interesting to you as well. They're also going to produce pro-war posters, including the very famous Rosie the Riveter poster, which we'll see if I can find. I had it open earlier. Let's see. Rosie the Riveter, where did you go? Rosie's gone. Let me look. Goodness. Who's in charge of these things? Where did you guys put Rosie? Let me look over here. That looks like the survey. Those are zoot suits. Let me type in Rosie. I have a friend named Rosie. It's her birthday. She's not a riveter, as far as I know. She's not. Do you know what a riveter is? She drills the little rivets or the screws into things. So she's an industrial employee. She makes stuff like, metal stuff, bombs primarily. All right. Now you may or may not remember, because I don't know what kids remember. I don't know what you're paying attention to during class. I'm always afraid you're doing that evil pre-cal or working on your physics during class. But Rosie the Riveter, which a lot of feminist groups use as kind of an iconic symbol. We had just spent a lot of time in the United States before World War II convincing women that it was a really bad idea for them to go into the workforce, because women were supposed to be at home taking care of their husbands and their kids. If women worked too much, it would make them frustrated and angry. They might also become infertile. unable to have children, and it also might make them unattractive to men. They'd be ugly. See what I'm saying? So we've just spent a couple of decades telling women they'd be ugly, infertile, and unfeminine if they went to work. So now we need women to go to work. How the heck are we going to do that? So you've got to convince women that they would be attractive in the workplace. So a big part of the focus of this Rosie the Riveter poster is that she needed to be attractive. She could be both strong and attractive. Now notice, you know, the muscle tone is not excessive or anything like that, because that wouldn't have been proper for the time period. And she is, you know, depicted as an attractive woman. She's, you know, height, weight, proportioned. Her face looks fine. There aren't wrinkles. You can tell that underneath the cloth that holds her hair back that she spent time on her hair. She's wearing makeup. So she's an attractive woman. So they wanted to make sure that women understood that even though they have to go to the workforce and they're really needed there, that they would still be attractive. So, and I always think it's pretty fascinating that women's groups, feminist groups, use that symbol as kind of a feminist icon, which it, but I mean, I get it as well, because this is going to be the beginning of large numbers of women going into the workforce and really staying in the workforce in a more permanent way, which definitely wasn't the design of what was going on, but it is going to be an effect of what was going on. All right. So back to this, let's see. Talked about Rosie. Where's Rosie? Oh, down here, okay. So Office of War Information, pro-war posters, propaganda, perhaps, Rosie the Riveter. And women were not just entering, you know, the standard workforce where they were making stuff for the war, but also entering the military in officially non-combat positions. But, you know, if they're flying planes, that they might be involved in combat, whether they intended or not. And the truth is, anytime you join the military, you might be involved in combat, whether that was the intention or not. Most Americans, male and female, likely did not expect permanent societal change as a result of women in the workforce. They assumed that would be a temporary situation. Oops, I scrolled and didn't mean to. And as the federal government begins to plan for a post-war world, some FDR advisors thought that this would be a chance to permanently extend New Deal programs and guarantee full employment and end poverty, which might include programs like free college, free health care, guaranteed jobs, and low-cost loans for mortgages. What we end up doing is putting a lot of those things into a GI Bill for former soldiers. So if you are in the military, then you can get free or low-cost college, low-cost home loans, you know, very low interest mortgages, and health care. All right, of course, you're gonna have to do something to earn that, aren't you? I think that I mentioned here a no strike pledge, and I feel like I can't remember if I've said this because it's the third time I've taught this class today, but some African-American workers did threaten to go on strike, and it was seen slightly as unpatriotic and then slightly as not, because part of the reason they wanted to be on strike, or they thought about going on strike, is there were labor codes, again, that allowed Black workers and white workers to be paid different amounts when they were doing the same job. So a labor union of African-American men that was originally the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. These are dudes who worked on trains, and they did what you would consider maybe room service or housekeeping kind of things if they'd been in hotels. So primarily passenger trains. And these guys were primarily African-American. So they had an African-American union of this group of workers, which later expands to all African-American workers. I think all African-American tradesmen. So this union's headed by a guy named A. Philip Randolph. And because of his assertion that a strike would be a proper thing to do, FDR asked to negotiate with him personally and leads to the creation of the Equal Opportunity, I think it's EEOC. Let me see if I listed that. Sorry that I'm scrolling, if it makes you a little dizzy or something. I thought it was the EEOC. I'm not sure why I didn't put this in here. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So that way you could go directly to the government if you worked in a government-sponsored job and you were being mistreated. So rather than going on strike, there was a place where you could go and say like, hey, pay me the same amount. And then of course, it mandated the same pay for the same job for men. The rest of that comes later. Okay, a little bit more, not much more, but a little bit more. And we'll stop and talk about the weekly question. If you're wondering, did we solve all racial issues? You know we didn't, because yeah, we probably still haven't, have we? But you're going to see some stuff come up that people will write books about. So, you know, book review if you're interested. Zoot suit riots happened in 1943. Guys who are wearing zoot suits are going out to dance, party, you know, whatever young guys in their zoot suits like to do. Zoot suits have a lot of fabric or material, so to make one would violate ration codes. What likely happened is that these guys went to Mexico, which is fairly close to California, bought the suits and brought them back. There were soldiers, Navy folks on shore leave. They were highly offended by the young men wearing the zoot suits because they saw that as unpatriotic, so they attacked them. When the police were called, the young men wearing the zoot suits were arrested, primarily Mexican-American young men. Let me see if I can find the zoot suit thing that I might have had pulled up. Let's see. Zoot suit. Sarna, when are you going to get this? Zoot. That is definitely not a zoot suit. That is the zoot suit. Let me go back and see if I can share this. You'd think I'd be better at this, but no, I am not. Here we go. All right, so zoot suit, I know that says costume, but the zoot suits are, you know, the longer coats, probably close to the knees, really baggy pants. A lot of times they were striped. You definitely had to have a hat and suspenders, wide tie. It was fairly common for you to also have a chain, which connected to your belt and your wallet. And it was primarily worn by young men of color and to dance clubs. So very trendy during the time period. Let's see. Oh, and this is about some plays and stuff. So, but made out of wool and used too much cloth to be officially legal. So people got frustrated by those and thought that the young men who wore them were being unpatriotic, where they probably had just gone shopping to Mexico. That's what had happened. Internment camps, and this is what your extra credit assignment will be about. I'll share this link with you, although it's in the notes. It's to a video made by the US government that explained why internment camps were necessary. These were camps where the US government took people of Japanese descent who lived in the United States, took their property away, and moved them essentially to prison camps in the middle of the desert. If you're wondering why we would do that as a country, our thought was, if Japan invades the West Coast, these guys will join the war effort on the side of Japan. There was a fellow named Korematsu who sued the United States government, saying they had violated his rights by putting him into a camp. He was born in the United States. Your clue is his name was Fred Korematsu, who was a fairly Americanized dude. He was living with his girlfriend, and when they came to take him away, he said, "I'm not Japanese, I'm Chinese." It didn't work for him. And then he finds a lawyer and says, "This is a violation of my rights, the rights of everyone of Japanese descent." And the Supreme Court says, "No, During times of war, the government has more power. Now, a year or so later, once the war was over, the Supreme Court and a commission on civil rights declared that internment had been the result of racial prejudice and war hysteria. Later on, much later on, in 1988, the US government will formally apologize and send I think it's like $20,000 check to anyone who had been in an internment camp, which included Mr. Sulu from Star Trek and Mr. Miyagi from the Karate Kid movies. So, both of whom wrote about it later. Korematsu will eventually get the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And that was, I think that was awarded by George Bush, older George Bush. Okay. And African Americans who got drafted complained, well, and other men of color too, complained of segregation, of disparate wages and treatment, and pointed out that part of what we were doing as Americans was trying to end racism overseas. You know, a very extreme version of racism, which ended in the Holocaust, but racism nonetheless. So if we were going to end racism overseas, perhaps it was time to have victory over racism in the United States as well, which is the book does a great job talking about this, the double V campaign. So victory abroad and in the US over racism. And you'll also see the beginnings of Pan-Africanism on a larger scale, where there's unity among people of African descent in non-African countries, and then a push to end colonialism within Africa. Okay, all right, it's a lot of stuff, wasn't it? All right, now I'm looking at your faces, kind of, sort of, and I'm going to remind you about the weekly question, which is to discuss whether or not World War II was truly the good war. And when you answer this question, specific examples, okay? Talk about, you know, names of people, names of laws, names of events, names of battles. I know that in general, you're going to suggest, and rightfully so, that World War II was a good war. What we were trying to defeat was, you know, fascism and Hitler and, you know, some horrible stuff. So there's no doubt this was a good war, and it's why there's not a lot of protest against the war. However, in the midst of this good war, there are internment camps, there's racial discrimination, there, you know, there's other stuff going on, development of atomic weapons, which could be seen as a negative thing as well, and the rise of the Soviet Union, which could be seen as a negative thing as well, because it's some other unchecked totalitarian type of government that we're not as harsh on because the Soviets are our allies. So when you answer that question, make sure you come up with some specific examples that have names, places, dates, and some explanation. I'm also going to say just really quickly, because I know it's almost time to go, that as I'm grading your stuff, what I'm noticing a lot is description. Like you'll say, you know, I mostly have graded that first question, that 18. I've graded a little bit of some other questions, but that was the one about new freedom and new nationalism. And you'll say new nationalism is this, new freedom is this. You're not giving a context of why we had it. You're not saying like, hey, presidential election of 1912, these are party platforms for these parties. And then you're not telling me why it matters. You know, like which one, who won, which one was enacted, how is it, you know, was it like it was promised, was it something different? So just the facts is not going to get you an A. You know what I'm saying? So just explanation's not enough. So we need a little bit of analysis, you know, maybe some background as well. So what I'm looking for is not, it's not as much regurgitation as it is telling me the so what part of this. Why does it matter? Why is it historically significant? Because, you know, you can just look on Wikipedia, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure some of you are doing, to get definitions of stuff. And some of you are using words that I know you don't normally use. I don't mean you're swearing. I mean, you're using historical terminology that I'm pretty sure doesn't make any sense to you. Like, you'll notice this, like if I put in a comment that you've used some word that I know you don't have a great understanding of. For example, not from any of you, but the first year I taught, I remember a long time ago, the first year I taught at ACC was, when was it? A long time ago, 93? I think it was 93. 2003, sorry. Yeah, 2003. So 2003, I have a student write a paper, doing a book review on the end of the sugar trade and slavery in the British Caribbean islands. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what a teenager wants to read about. And in the first paragraph, the child uses the word hagiography. Hagiography. There's no way on earth that she knows what that word means. So when you just take a word that is not your word, I mean, it's a word you would never use in any context, and I'm pretty sure you don't know what it means, and you just repeat it, that says to me, they looked this up from another source and then just used it word for word. Plus, I got that little plagiarism check that tells me where you got the information. But your book is where you should get the information. And if there's a weird history word in there that you don't normally use, you shouldn't use it unless you put a little definition next to it, because that'll also remind you what it means. You know what I'm saying? Because it's how we learn stuff. I'm not saying don't use new words. Of course, use new words. We always want to expand our vocabularies, but look the word up so you know what it means. You know what I'm saying? I'm almost always, I still look words up all the time. I don't know if you do. And it's so easy. That's why you have a cell phone, so you can look up information you don't know. You know what I'm saying? All right, it's almost time to go. Some of you are going like, no, it's past time to go. Well, you logged in late, so don't give me a hard time. Ooh, I just recorded that. I'm going to stop recording.